with me, sit down with them, try and, I wouldn't say patch up a form for them, but try and do it up as much as I can. And then go back now and basically filter out the information that I need. And if I need more information, I have their contact, and I will just go back and do it. So that's how I have done it in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right? So I don't know if that's good, that's bad, if
That's great.
okay.
That's great, that's great.
All right.
I don't know if there's any more questions to St. Lucia or to
I think
Ella.
that we had a question.
Yes. I just wanted to say that we in Dominica have benefited from funds from the agency as well, as an association of persons with disabilities, and there's another organization or a school that I know of that has also received equipment and other software hardware equipment. Presently, we have another project before NTRC in Dominica, and how it is done, they approach us, and we sit down with the person in charge, and we put the ideas and the project and the proposals together. So right now, we are at the stage of procurement, and we're just waiting for the necessary equipment and software to be presented to us. So yeah, we are aware of the process in Dominica. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
At the USF,
Can we
is
just get you the
oh,
microphone?
sure, no problem. Yeah, I thought I had a large voice.
You do.
Oh, the videotaping. Oh, great. At the USF, is it that it's an organization that probably has someone there acting as a consultant for persons with disabilities, so that there would be an easy transition when it comes to marketing and advertising? Because what my colleague Asanat is trying to say is that sometimes these things fall between the cracks. You will go to different organizations, yes, but let's just say you want to advertise on television or radio. Like, for example, for television, for persons with visual impairment, what happens is that they do and say things, and it's not that they don't care, it's just that it just slipped their minds. So, like, for example, I remember I was at home and they were advertising a storage solution, and I wanted it so badly, and I was ready to buy it. But guess what? They said, for more information, call the number on your screen. And I'm like, wait, what? And it's not that, you know, and it is horrible both ways, because I wanted to spend my money to buy the storage solution, and they got themselves out of a sale. So the question I'm asking, if it is you do have a consultant, and if you don't, maybe you should, as it relates for everything for persons with disabilities, because not just one person that knows one particular disability, but one that is familiar with all. If it is, I mean, the problem really is ignorance. Even within the persons with disabilities, we don't know about each other's disabilities as well. I remember I was at Hilton, and the person asked me what's my disability, and I said, I'm blind, and she said, well, you don't look blind. And then I said, well, what's your disability? She said, well, I have autism. I said, well, you don't sound autistic. So both of us were ignorant. So I'm asking if it's a long way of asking, do you have persons consulting at the USF? And if not, well, you can probably look at that option.
Okay. Thank you. Any of the colleagues want to comment or?
Good morning, all. Just to give a comment towards what Mr. Duncan had said. If it's to be a situation where you would like your information to go out, but you may not have your resources in your country. So let's say, for example, you have your website ready, you have all the information that you would like to share. Let's say you would want to use your website to inform, let's say, deaf people about what is going on. You may not have signers or interpreters ready in St. Vincent, but perhaps you may be able to contact us in Trinidad to see if we could facilitate that sort of thing. Because if there may be deaf persons in St. Vincent who would understand our sign language, more likely than not, because it's pretty similar throughout the Caribbean. So if you would like to take that way, instead of trying to engage people that you're not exactly sure how they would communicate, if deaf people would get the information, we could get our interpreters here to work. Our deaf interpreters would construct it so that wherever you are in the Caribbean, they would understand, yes, USF is available, and we could put out our information. And seeing that you're very techy, you could transfer it to on screen, so you make an advertisement in for a visual person, a person who can hear, a person who cannot hear, and be able to still send out your information, and not let what resources you have within your country be a barrier, right? You could always contact us.
Very good point. Does any of the USF's administrators or ECTAL want to respond to any of these comments? Otherwise, I think we can pass to the next presentation. Is that okay?
So we'd just like to invite Peter to sing and do his presentation for TAT.
Good morning, everyone. I am Peter Muzusing. I'm the regulatory accountant at the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And this year, the authority is celebrating its 15th year as the Trinidad and Tobago's regulator for telecommunications and broadcasting. And as I would have mentioned earlier, the Universal Service Fund is administered by the authority. And we go on the regulations, the Telecommunications Universal Service Regulations 20. It was passed in 2015, and it was recently amended in 2019. And one of the first initiatives, is actually the first initiative we want to pursue, is our PWD initiative. We thought it is a vital area to give them access to assistive technologies in Trinidad and Tobago. So I'll just go through the presentation on what this initiative is all about. And I think I have the same challenge as Cheryl, but it's working here for me now. So let's see. All right. So the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is an independent regulatory body, and we are established by an Act of Parliament, the Telecommunications Act, Chapter 4731. And one of the objects under our Act is to provide universal access to telecommunications services in Trinidad and Tobago. And as I mentioned earlier, we also have the Telecommunications Universal Service Regulations, the first being in 2015, and then we recently amended it in 2019. And later on, I will explain the reason for the amendments in those regulations. And under those regulations, it mandates the provision of approved assistive technologies to PWDs, and that is under Schedule 3 of the regulations. And I want to go back to the United Nations Convention, because this is one of the key principles we looked at in choosing the PWD initiative as our first initiative. And the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities emphasizes the importance of information and communication technologies in enabling PWDs to enjoy basic human rights and access ICTs on a basis equal to others. And Article 9 of the Convention states, to enable persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life, state parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure persons with disabilities access on an equal basis with others to the physical environment, to transportation, to information and communications, including information and communications, technologies and systems, and to other facilities and services open and provided to the public both in urban and rural areas. And good news, Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory to this convention, so it's good news for every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. All right, so the goal of our PWD initiative, this initiative supports the Universal Service Framework for Telecommunication Services for Trinidad and Tobago. And what it does is to seek to promote digital inclusion in Trinidad and Tobago. And this Universal Service Framework is available on the authority's website at tatt.org.tt. So you can have a look at it and see what this framework is about. And the goal of our initiative is to provide subsidized mobile devices to the visually and the hearing impaired in Trinidad and Tobago. However, the mobile devices, and I think all mobile, when we were doing our research, have the assistive features that will help each PWD. Things such as messaging options, internet capability, vibration alert, and such. And what the authority will do is that we will fund 90% of each mobile device up to $540. So, and this is $540 plus VAT, so the phone could cost $600 plus VAT. Now we're going to subsidize, like I said, 90% of each mobile device up to $540. Because what we realized when we had meetings with the PWD organizations, with the persons with disabilities, and also with the Ministry of Social Development, most of these people, they fall under a very low income bracket, and it's very difficult for them financially and otherwise. So we wanted to ensure that it's an easy burden and they have access to these mobile devices at a price that they can reasonably afford. All right, the objectives of our initiative. One, to ensure that the PWDs have access to basic telecommunications mobile services. They want to have these devices just like anybody else, have access to living a normal life just like anybody else and an independent lifestyle. To make ICTs more affordable, so by us subsidizing 90% of the cost of the device, it becomes more affordable to each PWD. And by doing so, we're reducing the digital divide by promoting digital inclusion of the PWDs. And we're also enhancing the quality of life by enabling PWDs to participate more fully in society. And we ensure that they're independent living for the PWDs. So to get this project off and running, we had a number of meetings with all our key stakeholders involved in this project. So we listened. First of all, we have to say thank you for the Ministry of Public Administration for supporting this initiative. That's our line ministry. We also had a lot of meetings, and Asanat will talk how many meetings we had and the suggestions that came through, and we listened to every one of them. And this is from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. And I think right now the project is that where we had the memorandum of understanding now is before them for review, and they will submit their comments before we could initiate this project in full. We also had meetings with the PWD organizations and also with the mobile telecommunications providers. All right, so we have two phases of our project. The first phase is that we want to introduce is a pilot phase, and we are targeting 100 PWDs who are visually and hearing impaired, and we expect this pilot to run from November to January. It could be November, December, because we're still trying to iron out a few things before we have this pilot run, and then we'll have full implementation in 2020, hopefully in February. We should be able to start this full implementation to all PWDs where they can access their subsidized mobile devices. So we have some eligibility criteria that they must meet, each PWD must meet. So the applicant must first of all be visually and or hearing impaired. The applicant must be in receipt of a disability grant issued by the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. The applicant must be a resident of Trinidad and Tobago. The applicant must be 18 years and over. And the applicant must provide the authority with the evidence of the disability. So you can look at a medical report or a doctor's certificate. And I believe when they were getting the disability grant, they would have these reports as well that they would have to submit to the ministry in order to get the grant. The process is very simple. We try to make it as very simple because we don't want the PW to get a runaround. You know, when you hear ministry, you hear runaround, and you don't get nothing out of it after a couple of years probably, and you still don't get what you want, right? So we have a very simple process. And we also when we were developing the process, we wanted to ensure that eliminate any kind of fraud or risk or misuse of the universal service funds. So what we will ask each PWD to do is to schedule an appointment. So really and truly, and this is at the authorities' offices, and we have hired additional staff to help specifically with this project. So there are 2 new persons on board that will be handling each appointment from the PWDs. So you schedule an appointment, you call into the authorities' office. We would like application form which will be available online, so they could pre-fill it out and come into the authority, or if they wish, they could come into the authority and we will assist with the application. And they will be asked to send in some supporting documentation. And this supporting documentation is very basic. It's a national copy of the ID. We'll ask them for the medical report, a doctor's certificate, and also a copy of the disability grant. So if we are looking at starting the project, say in November, we would ask them for at least October's disability grant, a copy to show that they actually are receiving the grant. For those who have they receive the grant through direct deposit through the bank, they would have to come into the authority, submit the application, and in conjunction with the Ministry of Social Development, we will have to verify that they do receive the disability grant. So the process might take up to a week. That's what the deadline Asana told me, a week. And we will get back to them, and we will issue the authorization letter, because obviously we'd have to consult with them. They have the database, and we also have privacy concerns as well. They have the concerns of privacy, so we would have to give them the information, the applicant's name and so forth, and they would check the database and ensure that the person does in fact receive a disability grant through the bank. So we have the approval of the application letter. For those who do receive the direct, the physical check, we would issue the authorization letter immediately. Now, where in Trinidad and Tobago do you get something immediately? Only in the Telecommunications Authority. So we have the approval of the application after these verification checks, and that's really, the verification checks is really making sure the documents are in order. We're trying to make it as simple, a one-stop shop. You come in here, you bring the relevant documentation, and hopefully you don't have to stay longer than 20 minutes to get your authorization letter. We will issue that authorization letter, and what the PWD will do now is submit that authorization letter to their preferred mobile provider at specific locations. So we want to have it in 6 locations, 1 in North, 1 in South, 1 in East, West Central, and 1 location in Tobago where they can access the mobile devices. Training. So the PWD is probably wondering, well, you know, they're going to get this mobile device. How are they going to be treated? So what the Ministry of Social Development and Family Service they have collaborated with us, and they have facilitated free sign language training through the University of the West Indies. This training has been completed, and representatives from the Telecommunications Authority and also from the mobile providers attended this training session. It ran for approximately 16 sessions, was it, Asanat? 16 sessions, and they had to go through a test and so forth to get their certification. So at these locations, they hopefully should have representatives that could assist the PWD. And what it will do is provide a superior level of customer service to the PWD, and it also enable them to effectively communicate more effectively with the person who is deaf or hearing impaired. It will also help them to understand and appreciate the cultural and linguistic barriers the deaf or hearing impaired face when seeking to access care and support. So the Telecommunications Authority thought about everything, right? Good. Funding. And like I said earlier, the PWD initiative will be the first project to be implemented and funded through the Universal Service Fund. As such, mobile providers, they will be reimbursed. So there's a process when the PWD goes to their preferred mobile provider. The mobile provider now has to submit documentation to the authority on a quarterly basis, and that we will actually be paying them the reimbursement upon the submission of this documentation. And of course, our Universal Service Fund will be subject to an annual independent audit. So there's no fraud or bubble in Trinidad terms, right? Right. Future projects. Schedule 3 now, we go back to the Telecommunications Universal Service Regulations 2015 and 19 as amended, facilitates the special provision of approved assistive technology for persons with disabilities to support use of basic telecommunications services. Now that is what, it's a mandatory universal service initiative, which means it has to be implemented by concessionaires throughout Trinidad and Tobago. And what is basic telecommunication services? Well, Schedule 1 states it's voice telecommunication services, call origination and call determination, access to emergency services, directory assistance, free itemized billing, and internet service provision at various locations in Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to talk about this internet service provision. I don't know if you all are aware, we are also involved in the TT Wi-Fi project. It's a mandatory universal service initiative. And it's at the advanced stages, planning stages, where we're going to implement Wi-Fi at all public libraries, public hospitals, and major transportation hubs in Trinidad and Tobago. So that's all the mandatory. We are working with our concessionaires to implement those projects. Such initiatives which meet the above criteria are eligible for funding through the Universal Service Fund. All concessionaires shall implement the mandatory universal service initiatives identified in Schedule 3. And I just want to end with a small quote, and it's a child is only as disabled as the environment and the beliefs of the people around them. And it's from Balai Pillai, and that's a physical therapist, a renowned physical therapist throughout the world. And I think that's the end of my presentation, so thanks for listening. And if there are any questions, we'll probably take it now.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So let me applaud you all on the initiative, right? I'm very happy to know this is happening. But I am not on disability. I may never get disability. What are you all considering projects that I will be able to get access, such as being able to rent assistive devices that I can probably use at my job place or even for studies? And are there considerations, because we have persons who have acquired a disability, they don't get disability grant, but they get a form of disability through NIS. Right, I don't really want to use the word that we refer to it here. Unfortunately, we don't use the proper language of that, yes. So are there any considerations for that?
Well, first of all, like we said, the first project is for the hearing and visually impaired. It is a pilot project, but we want to see the success of this project first before we roll out. And hopefully in future, we could actually identify other disabilities other than visually and hearing impaired that we can assist persons through the Universal Service Fund. Yes, it did come up at the Universal Service Committee meetings. Why were we limiting it to the visually and hearing impaired? So a suggestion was made, let's see the success of this project first. This project will be rolled out for approximately 2 years. And then we would try to see if we could actually expand it out to different areas of disabilities as well. So what you can do, if you have...
But I'm wondering, are you only going to limit it to persons on disability grants?
Right, that was also another concern. That was another concern, yeah.
I'm employed, I am still in poverty, right?
Yeah, yeah. One of the we factored in all these things, and you know the person who receives a disability grant has to be of an income. I believe it is $12,000 TT dollars for the year. They can't be more than $12,000 TT before you get the disability grant. If you get $12,001, maybe you may not be able to get the disability grant. I think that's what we were looking at. We will consider it. It did come up, like I said, at the Universal Service Committee meetings. And we will try and see, I know this was a major concern for persons that they have to be in receipt of this disability grant. But this was really to prevent the minimization of fraud and misuse and stuff taking place through the fund. Because as Ectel rightfully said, the concessionaires contributing to the fund, and they will be scrutinizing the use of this fund even more so, because it's their money that goes in the fund and how this money is actually going to be spent. But it will come up for consideration, and if the project is successful, we may very well expand it out to persons who do not receive a disability grant, or even maybe the age that the person could access the subsidized mobile device. So it's something that we'd look at for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out, yeah, you're going to subsidize the mobile devices, but when it comes, are these recipients going to be responsible for the pain of it? Because, you know, there are persons with disabilities who have devices, but sometimes they don't have credit, and some they might not be able to utilize the device if they don't have the credit. So is that going to be subsidized as well, or how is it going to be done? So just to have a mobile as a stipend, if you cannot pay for the bill at the end of the month?
So what I'm getting from you is that you're looking at plans, a mobile plan to accompany the assistive device. We are actually in talks with the mobile providers to provide a proper plan for the person with a disability, so something that could be advantageous to you. It wouldn't probably be the normal rates that are charged to the rest of the population in Trinidad and Tobago, but special rates specifically for persons with disabilities. One thing that we have given the mobile providers the liberty to do is to promote this initiative how they see fit, and they can actually support it through whatever plans they